Chapter 1051. Although his tone was flat, the arrogance in it was obvious. Mei replied respectfully, yes. But he was excited and shocked. The meaning of his master's words was very clear. That was, with his master's current cultivation, only the immortal Emperor Jin Taikai was qualified to fight with him in the entire Immortal Palace. As for the others, they could not stop him at all, so there was no need for him to take them seriously. Wang Qing stretched out a wide palm towards the crack that had condensed into a claw. A snow-blue light buried at the bottom of the abyss shot out with a whoosh, and flipped in the air above the mountain peak. With a clang, it decisively stabbed into the ground not far behind him. Although almost half of the sword body was inserted into the stone ground, there was still a large part of the sword exposed. The flowing snow-blue light had already disappeared, and under the sunlight, there was a bright spot on the mountain peak that was shining brightly. This six-dragon snow-blue sword was quietly inserted into the mountain peak. From beginning to end, Wang Qing didn't touch it even once. In the next few months he still didn't touch it even once. In fact, he rarely even looked at it. The man and the sword faced each other from a distance, only communicating with each other through their minds that outsiders could not see. It was not until a few months later when Wang Qing left the mountain that the six-dragon snow-blue sword was pulled out of the mountain peak. If there is nothing else, you may leave, Wang Qing said indifferently. Mei seemed to remember something and took out a small red box. He held it with both hands and said, Wuxiaozi wanted me to give this to Master. Wang Qing did not ask what it was. He took the red box and held it in his palm in silence. After Mei left, he slowly opened it. The box was filled with snow-white silver sand. He tilted the box slightly, and the fine silver sand flowed out like water, drifting with the wind into the distance. Gradually, a snow-blue ring buried in the silver sand was revealed. He stretched out two fingers and picked up the ring. After the red box was abandoned, the silver sand rolled out and fell into the crack under his feet. This was a ring that was slightly wider than an ordinary ring. The material was obviously the same as the material used to forge the six-dragon snow-blue sword. They were both rare blue sea gold essence in the three realms. There was a huge independent space in the ring, several times larger than the 10 spaces in an ordinary storage bracelet. However, this did not fail to attract Wang Qing's attention. His gaze landed on the inner surface of the ring. The two words Ruoyun were engraved on it, causing him to be unable to shift his gaze away for a long time. After a long time, Wang Qing sighed softly and said to himself, Old Hua, are you reminding me to remember something? Not many people knew the meaning of Ruoyun. It was a woman's name. It was the name of Wang Qing's first wife. Also, what no one knew was that his wife's surname was Hua and her name was Ruoyun. She was the sister of the Lifire Palace's sect leader, Huajun. Back then there were 3 siblings. The eldest was Huahualai Huakongzi, the second was Huajun Huashaozi, and the third was the younger sister Huadai Huaruoyun. However, before the Lifire Palace was established, the third sister, Huadai, had already married Wang Qing. Other than those involved, no one else knew about this. Holding this snow-blue ring and silently looking at it for a while, Wang Qing finally put it on his left index finger. In the Paradise Wonderland, in the back garden of the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Great Commander's mansion, the well-dressed Mu Qianjiao sat in a pavilion and silently wept. The quality of the golden robe was very good, and it didn't get wet even after being soaked. Her tears fell directly on it. Her right hand, which rested on the stone table, held a jade archive. She did not know when Wu Xiong had appeared beside her. She was in a daze and did not notice him. Wu Xiong also looked at her silently, his face dark and gloomy. He didn't expect that even with so many people working together, they still couldn't kill Yu Qianqiu. His plan to assassinate Yu Qianqiu without anyone knowing had actually caused such a huge commotion. It was truly beyond his expectations. The people over there shouldn't have made such a big mistake. Otherwise, no one would have an easy time. He asked himself this question more than once. However, this was not what worried him the most. What worried him the most was that Yu Qianqiu actually had the token of the Emperor of the Underworld. Without a doubt, the matter would be blown out of proportion. Once the token of the Emperor of the Underworld was revealed, it would be impossible not to attract the attention of the Immortal Emperor. Fortunately, he received news from the other side that the matter had been resolved and that there was no need to investigate further. However, the other side was also urging him to leave the Immortal Palace as soon as possible. Otherwise he might be in danger. However, Wu Xiong knew that if there really was danger, he would not be able to leave even if he wanted to, since he was already being watched. Therefore, he mustered up his courage and went to the Immortal Palace to seek forgiveness from the Immortal Emperor, Jin Tai. He said that his father-in-law had used his name to collude with a group of people to seek revenge on Xianxia in the underworld. He was guilty of negligence and asked the immortal emperor to punish him. In the end, the immortal emperor Jin Tai said that the ignorant were not guilty. Emir Xianxia was not as valuable as the life of his external affairs grand commander. However, he did not want this to happen a second time. Wu Xiong heaved a sigh of relief and thanked him profusely. Although it seemed like he was safe for the time being, his heart was still stretched taut. He was prepared to find a suitable opportunity to leave as soon as possible. He had just returned from the Immortal Palace when he saw this scene. His gaze fell upon the jade archive in Mu Tianjiao's hands. He sighed softly and said, "If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have had people deliver the news from the outside world to you every day." Mu Tianjiao raised her head with tears streaming down her face. She looked at him and choked with sobs. "You knew all along?" News travels slower in the underworld than in the immortal realm. When the news spreads in the immortal realm. Wu Xiong walked up to her and patted her shoulder in consolation. "The news from the Immortal Palace arrived a few days earlier than you did. I've been thinking about how to break the news to you. I'm also very sad that something has happened to my father-in-law. However, the dead are dead and the living have to look forward. My condolences, madam." As expected, he went to seek revenge on Xianxia. "I've been worried. I told him that he was no match for Xianxia, but he wouldn't listen." Mu Tianjiao suddenly stood up and grabbed Wu Xiong's hand. She lost control of her emotions and asked, "Who did it? Who killed my father? Those people had no grudge against my father. Why would they want to kill him? Was it Xianxia who did it?" Wu Xiong did not know how to answer her. The public news in Twilight City was that another group of people from the underworld had killed Mu Bing, but he knew in his heart that he was afraid that Mu Bing had not experienced such a big scene. He was afraid that he would be implicated if things got out of hand, so he found some reliable people to cooperate with Mu Bing. Those people would not kill Mu Bing at all. In fact, the people involved in this matter knew very well that at that time, Xianxia was outside the dungeon. There was no one else in the dungeon who would kill Mu Bing except for Xianxia. However, he could not say such words now. He only deeply regretted agreeing to Mu Bing in the first place. Wu Xiong looked at Mu Tianjiao and sighed slightly in his heart. The reason why he was jealous was that he really cared about this woman. Otherwise, he would not have done such an impulsive thing. According to the news from the other side, it should not be Xianxia. Xianxia was locked up alone in a dungeon at that time. It is unlikely that he would have the opportunity to kill father-in-law. This has been confirmed by the army of Onyx. Wu Xiong said helplessly. "But I saw the news that Xianxia broke out with my father's head." Mu Tianjiao went straight to the point and cried intermittently. "Since he could break out of the dungeon, it means that the dungeon could not trap him. It means that he had the opportunity to kill my father. What's more, he has the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in his hand. He can command the army of Onyx. Who knows if the army of Onyx is cooperating with him to put on a show?" This woman was as smart as ever. She saw the suspicious point at once. Wu Xiong sighed in his heart. He really did not know what to say. He could only grab her hand and comfort her. "Don't worry. The truth will come to light one day." He originally wanted to say something about punishing the culprit, but when he thought of the terrifying Emperor of the Underworld standing behind Xianxia, he really did not know if he would have the opportunity to settle the score with Xianxia. After a period of sadness, Mu Tianjiao wiped away her tears and revealed the strong expression that she had when she was supporting the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. She directly knelt before Wu Xiong. Wu Xiong was startled and quickly helped her up. "Madam, what are you doing?" Seeing that she could no longer kneel, Mu Tianjiao said decisively, "My abilities are really limited, and I'm really powerless to do anything about the netherworld. I beg the great commander to help me find my father's body in the netherworld and bury it." This. Wu Xiong seemed to be in a difficult position. Mu Tianjiao bit her lip. "If it is really difficult, then forget it." Sigh. Wu Xiong let out a long sigh. He took out a box made of jade from his storage bracelet and gently placed it on the stone table. He said helplessly, "The people of the Dark Nether Army have searched for father-in-law's body, but they couldn't find it. Instead, Xianxia asked the people of the Heartless Palace to deliver father-in-law's head. It's inside." He was not lying. At that time, Lu Lin of the Onyx Army had considered that Mu Bing was the father-in-law of Wu Xiong, the great commander of external affairs of the Immortal Palace, and had really sent people to the collapsed ground to search for Mu Bing's body. In fact, no one knew that Mu Bing had been dragged several hundred meters underground by Xianxia and killed. His headless corpse had been cut into pieces and buried deep underground. Naturally, it was impossible to find him at such a depth of several hundred meters. Mu Qinjiao opened the jade box with trembling hands. Mu Bing's twisted head was lying inside. It was obvious that he had suffered a lot before his death. Fortunately, the corpse of an immortal wouldn't rot so easily in a short period of time. Otherwise it would be impossible to see who it was. Mu Qinjiao's tears fell silently again. She bit her lips until blood came out and forcefully controlled her emotions. She stared at the bloody and empty eyes on Mu Bing's head and said, "My father didn't have that much of a grudge with those people. They didn't have to kill him, chop off his head and gouge out his eyes. If they didn't have a deep grudge, they wouldn't have done such a thing." Chapter 1052. Mu Qinjiao's trembling hand reached into the box and touched Mu Bing's cheek. When her fingers swept past the blood-stained right eye socket, she said in a trembling voice, "This is a sword wound. When that person used a sword to gouge out my father's right eye, he must have said, 'arrogant.'" When her fingers slid down to the blood-stained left eye socket, she murmured, "He must have said, 'looking down on others.'" She already had a vague outline of her father's murderer in her mind. Based on her understanding of that person, she guessed that the words he said were roughly the same as what the murderer himself had said during the torture. She slowly lifted Mu Bing's head and was about to hold it in her arms when she suddenly discovered that there was a wound on Mu Bing's lips. If she hadn't accidentally discovered it, she wouldn't have noticed it. It was covered by the blood on his lips. She opened Mu Bing's mouth with trembling hands and immediately smelled a strong, slightly rancid smell of blood. She saw that in the empty mouth, his tongue had been crushed, and not a single tooth could be found intact. The sack was a ball in his mouth. It was obvious that someone had stabbed a sword into his mouth and tortured him. Mu Bing, who was standing to the side, was also slightly shocked. He didn't expect that there was such a secret in his mouth. He didn't know what Mu Bing had said to provoke Yu Qianzhou to do such a cruel thing. His head was chopped off, his eyes were dug out, and his tongue was crushed. Mu Qinjiao suddenly cried out in pain and fainted on the spot. Wu Xiong was shocked and quickly supported her. He pressed a palm on her head to dispel the anger in her heart. After a while, she finally woke up and said anxiously, "My condolences, madam. We will take revenge sooner or later. Don't damage your health because of anger." Mu Qinjiao lay in his arms, tears streaming down her face as she smiled bitterly. "I told you that this person wasn't simple and he had no enmity with us. I told you not to go against him, but why didn't you listen to me? If you hadn't chased him to the underworld, you wouldn't have been killed." Wu Xiong grabbed Mu Bing's head from her bosom and put it back into the jade box. He frowned and said, "From Madam's words, could it be Yu Qianzhou's doing? It's clear that there's a deep hatred between them to do such a thing. Father has you backing him up. Even if he had enemies in the past, most people wouldn't dare to do anything to him now, let alone go to the underworld to kill him. Among Father's enemies, Yu Qianzhou is the only one who has the ability to commit murder in the netherworld. Yu Qianzhou is a vindictive person. Who else could it be but him?" Mu Qinjiao deduced and locked onto the real culprit. "So Yu Qianzhou is a despicable person in her heart. Looks like I misunderstood her." Wu Xiong looked at her speechlessly. After a moment of silence, he said in a low voice, "Don't worry. Could it be that he scared himself when he took out the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld?" Thinking of this, the scholar felt that it was highly possible. He couldn't help but smile faintly and said, "Did you find any signs of where they were going?" "They were very careful in the Netherworld River. They tried their best to avoid places with people or many people. They kept going against the current and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Before we came, we received a message from our friends from the Netherworld River's water tribe. They said that they would probably enter the endless horizon along the Netherworld River in a few days," the 1,000 soldiers in silver armor said. "Endless horizon? What are they going to do there?" the scholar asked in surprise. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor spread out his hands helplessly and said, "They are so sneaky. I don't know what they are going to do." For a moment, the two famous big shots in the Netherworld couldn't figure out what they were doing. The scholar put down the pen in his hand and walked around the table in the attic. Suddenly, he stopped at the window and said, "1,000 soldiers, ask your friends from the Netherworld River's water tribe to keep a close eye on them. Tell them to contact me at any time. I'm going out for a while." After saying this, he turned into a white light and flashed across the pitch-black night sky at an incredible speed. He quickly disappeared into the distant horizon. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor was stunned. He didn't have the time to say yes. He looked at the words written on the table and pinched his chin as he said suspiciously, "Destiny, heaven's law. It doesn't seem like they are expressing their feelings. Why did they give the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld to Yu Qianzhou and then pursue it? What does he want? Shaking his head, he couldn't figure it out. Then he also flashed out. Just as the two big shots in the Netherworld Royal Palace said, there was indeed an escaping clam in the Netherworld River. It was a huge clam that had lived for millions of years. With two people in his stomach, Xinyu kept dodging in the Netherworld River. Since he knew that the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in Yu Qianzhou's hand was fake, he was more afraid than Yu Qianzhou and Grey Cloud Xin. What kind of person was the Emperor of the Netherworld? The Emperor could kill him with a flick of his finger. His millions of years of experience told him that it was not shameful to be humble and cowardly. It was best to stay alive. In his smooth stomach, Yu Qianzhou used the meatball in his stomach as a pillow and slept soundly. In the beginning he pretended to be calm and pretended to sleep. But in the end he got over it. Anyway, what was going to happen would happen. He would deal with it as it came. It was useless to worry. He had to deal with it calmly. As soon as his tense nerves relaxed, he really fell asleep. He even snored from time to time. He slept like a log. It had been a long time since he had such a relaxed sleep. He didn't know where he was in his dreams. Sometimes, he dreamed that he was caught by the subordinates of the Emperor of the Netherworld. But when he was locked in a cage, he found that he was in a prison in his previous life. There were prison guards in uniform walking around in front of him. So, he asked the prison guard to get him a cigarette. The prison guard was wearing a big cap, but he said in Grey Cloud Xian's voice, "Do you want me to choke you to death with the smoke?" He immediately cursed loudly. As he was cursing, he was suddenly escorted out of the prison. As a result, he found that he had been escorted into a magnificent palace by the police. The scholarly Emperor of the Underworld stood high above him, smiling sinisterly at him and baring his hideous fangs, as if he was about to skin and swallow him alive. He tried his best to see the other party's face clearly, but it was blurry and he couldn't see it clearly. In the end, he didn't care anymore and teleported back to Utopia. He realized that he was driving a sports car on the highway. He was driving Jianghu, who was dressed in sexy clothes. He told Jianghu arrogantly, "We've taken out the money we left in the Swiss bank. We can live comfortably for the rest of our lives." Suddenly, dark clouds appeared in the sky. Grey Cloud Xian's old face suddenly appeared in the sky. He stared at them in the car and snorted coldly, "Do you want money or your life?" He looked like he was robbing them. The most terrifying thing was that Jianghu suddenly turned around to look at him. She had a beautiful face, but she said in the same voice as Grey Cloud Xin, "Do you want money or your life?" In the end, he woke up with a start. He suddenly sat up and looked at his surroundings. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief and fell back down. He waved his hand at Grey Cloud Xin, who was staring at him with a twitching expression. "Old song. I had a nightmare just now. You were talking everywhere in the dream. It gave me a fright." "Nightmare? You smiled and asked for cigarettes and you withdrew money from Switzerland to live comfortably. You call that a nightmare?" Grey Cloud Xin said with a mocking expression. He couldn't help but exchange a few words with Yu Qianzhou, who was talking in his sleep. "Oh." Yu Qianzhou immediately jumped up like a spring. He pointed at Grey Cloud Xin and exclaimed, "How did you know? You even know about Switzerland? *CK. Did you transmigrate here too?" "Transmigrate here? I flew here, okay?" Grey Cloud Xin sneered and said, "You talk a lot in your sleep. It's hard for me not to know. I say you're really broad-minded. You're already in this state, yet you can still sleep and have sweet dreams?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He had been talking in his sleep. He could talk in his sleep? He was slightly shocked. He didn't say any secrets that couldn't be exposed, right? It seemed like he couldn't sleep in front of strangers anymore. It was too dangerous. He wanted to ask Grey Cloud Xin what else he had said. Suddenly, Xinyu's voice came. "Everyone be careful. We're about to enter the Netherworld River in the endless horizon." Chapter 1053. The two who were bickering pricked up their ears at the same time to listen to the movements outside. They looked at each other and saw the nervousness in each other's eyes. They stopped talking, afraid that something unexpected would happen. However, they seemed a little lost amidst their nervousness. Did they reach the endless horizon so smoothly? According to Xinyu, the Netherworld River was the same as the land. It was also ruled by powerful factions. The long journey was full of danger and accidents could happen at any time. The two were mentally prepared for the worst. However, what made them feel strange was that they reached the endless horizon without any danger. Someone even slept the entire way. Compared to Xinyu's explanation, the two felt that it was a little unbelievable. In fact, even Jiuyu himself felt a little baffled. let alone the two of them. Since when had the Netherworld River Basin become so peaceful? Where did all those fellows who blocked the road, robbed, killed, bullied the weak and committed all sorts of crimes go? Everything had its cause and effect. In fact, Xianyu's cautiousness, or rather timidity, and familiarity with this route were also objective reasons for being able to reach this place smoothly. Most importantly, due to the intervention of the Netherworld Emperor's guards, the Silver Armor Army, the Silver Armor Army's friends in the Netherworld River were not weak either. With these powerhouses' forces secretly monitoring their journey, those who had ill intentions along the way would dispel their evil thoughts after discovering them. This was equivalent to providing protection for them in disguise. This was the real internal reason. Xianxia and xuanhuan held their breaths and listened attentively to the movements outside. It would be a lie to say that they did not want to go out and take a look. Even the Netherworld cultivators did not dare to step into the punishment land of the Netherworld, let alone the people from the immortal world. The two of them wanted to see the true appearance of the endless horizon. With this experience, it would be an enviable qualification to show off. However, no one had the guts to go out and take a look. Endless horizon. Those who heard this name for the first time would probably associate it with darkness. In fact, in a place as dark as the Netherworld, there was probably no place brighter than it. It was definitely not a lie. Almost half of the vast endless horizon was fused with the bright and wriggling red light, and it was steaming hot. Coming here, one would realize that one was like a freshly baked bun. On a narrow section of the Netherworld River, red light enveloped the river, dyeing the entire river red. On both sides of the river Styx, there was a row of soldiers in red armor. Their clothes and armor were bright red, and each of them gave off a vicious aura, as if they had charged out from blood and fire. Not far behind them, there was a hot red mist rising into the night sky. They stood quietly by the river as if waiting for something. One of them, be it in terms of appearance or temperament, was clearly different from the other red-armored soldiers. Although he was also wearing red armor, his armor was like the shell of a beetle. It was extremely close-fitting and had sharp edges. He was tall and sturdy with a layer of short hair sticking to his scalp. His face was thick and his eyes were as round as copper bells. He had the aura of a tiger-lion beast king. Both his shoulders and the upper half of his body were wrapped in red iron chains that were as thick as a thumb. They were like thick armor that was stretched taut on his muscular chest. It was as if the two bulging muscles on his chest could snap the iron chains with a crack if he exerted force. Suddenly, an undetectable wave came from the night sky. The tall and sturdy man with the red chains frowned slightly. Then he waved his hand, and 100 of the red-armored soldiers on both sides of the river Styx immediately scuttled into the river Styx and quickly disappeared into the water. The giant clam that was almost sticking to the bottom of the river Styx suddenly came to a halt. Jianghu realized that the path in front of him had been cut off by the hundreds of red-armored soldiers. Oh no! It's the Purgatory Army that controls the endless horizon. They've blocked our path. Jianghu panicked and told the two people in his body. Xianxia and xuanhuan quickly stood up. Xuanhuan stared at Xianxia and sneered. What's going to happen is going to happen. It's all your fault. I've fallen into the pit with you. Damn it. What's the hurry? Jianghu, turn around. Let's hide for a while first. They might not be targeting us. Xianxia waved his hand and shouted. Jianghu had the same intention. He did not hesitate to turn around. In the end, he realized that 100 red-armored soldiers had appeared out of nowhere and cut off their path of retreat. Jianghu looked around in fear. In the end, he realized that he could not see through the cultivation of any of the red-armored soldiers. Now the only way out was to leave through the water. However, the endless horizon was the main camp of the Purgatory Army. It would be even more dangerous to leave the river Styx. It was impossible to escape. What should we do? What should we do? The path ahead and back have been cut off by the Purgatory Army. We have nowhere to run. Jianghu was completely panicking. Why are you panicking? You're from the river Styx. They won't dare to do anything to you. Be careful. They won't make things difficult for you. Xianxia tried to make his tone as calm as possible. He patted his plump body in the clam and laughed. Jianghu, whether we can pass this time depends on you. Jianghu thought about it and agreed with him. He was from the river Styx, so the Purgatory Army would not do anything to him. However, when he slowly approached the soldiers in front of him, his stomach still palpitated with fear. Hence, he forced himself to calm down and asked with a smile, I'm from the water tribe of the Netherworld River. I wonder if you can make way for me and let me pass. A red-armored soldier floating in the water slowly floated forward and pushed his palm to stop him. We're pursuing a fugitive. Regardless of whether you're in the sky or in the water, You have to be checked. If there's nothing wrong, we'll naturally let you pass. Jiu was stunned. He plucked up his courage and asked, "You're from the land. Since when did you have the right to set up a checkpoint in the river Styx to check the river Styx?" "That's not something you should worry about. We've naturally informed the overlord of this water body." The red-armored soldier pointed at Jiu's huge body in the water and said, "I see that your clam is huge. It's big enough to hide a few people inside. Please open it and let us search. If there's nothing wrong, we'll immediately let you pass." Jiu was speechless, but he did not dare to open the clam for them to search. While he was panicking and hesitating, the red-armored soldier suddenly shouted, "Cooperate quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for using force." The two people hiding in the clam looked at each other. They had clearly heard the movements outside. Although the people searching outside did not say who the fugitive was, the two of them felt that they were the ones being captured. "Old Song, you're an expert. What do you think we should do?" Yu Qianzhou humbly asked with telepathy. "You respect me as an expert now?" Gray Cloud XN rolled his eyes, but now was not the time to fight. He replied telepathy, "With Jiuyu's cultivation, if anything happens, we won't be able to break out. Hiding outside is not a solution. If anything happens, are you confident that you can help me and Jiuyu break out?" Yu Qianzhou asked cautiously with telepathy. Gray Cloud XN thought for a while and slowly replied, "I can't say for sure since I can't see the situation outside. But I'm sure there are many experts in purgatory. Plus, the endless sea is vast. Even if I can break out for a while, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist a large number of experts. If I'm alone, maybe it won't be difficult to break out. Maybe they're not here to capture us, Old Song. Just be prepared for the worst." After Yu Qianzhou said that, he suddenly patted Xinyu and said in a clear voice, "Xinyu, open it and let us out." Jiuyu, who was in a dilemma, opened the giant shell. Two people flashed out. Jiuyu also turned into human form. The three of them stood side by side. Besides the carvings of the Underworld Emperor who was dressed like a scholar, there were also carvings of the 12 Underworld generals on both sides of the wall. One of them looked exactly like this man. Even their expressions were very similar. Thinking of what Sangyun Xian had just said, Yu Qianzhou immediately let out a breath of cold air, and he secretly sent a voice transmission. "You guessed right, this person is indeed difficult to deal with. If I'm not wrong, this person is one of the 12 Netherworld generals that shake the Netherworld." "Old Song, why do I feel that something is amiss? Could it be that he was sent here to deal with you? One of the 12 Underworld generals?" Jiuyu was shocked. Even though he hadn't seen these 12 figures before, he had heard about them. They were the famous old experts of the Underworld. They were already experts in the middle stage of the Underworld Emperor more than 100,000 years ago. Their outstanding military exploits were enough to intimidate the heroes of the Underworld. They were the 12 most capable generals of the Underworld Emperor by Qi. They had even followed the Underworld Emperor by Qi to fight the infamous Thousand Swords Demon Monarch. Those who survived the battle and escaped alive were even more extraordinary. An ordinary expert in the middle stage of the Underworld Emperor couldn't compare to them. "How do you know he is one of the 12 Underworld generals? Have you seen him before?" Sangyun XN secretly transmitted his voice, but his gaze never left that person. That person's gaze, which seemed to be solid, rapidly pressed towards his gaze. His ferocious aura, which had been through a long period of slaughter, forced Sangyun XN to not dare to look directly at that person. He quickly shifted his gaze. Yu Qianzhou replied secretly, "I have seen the portraits of the 12 Underworld generals of the Underworld before. This man is one of them." Jiuyu and Yu Qianzhou looked left and right at the red-armored soldiers who had come out of the Underworld River. He said secretly, "They actually sent out the Underworld generals to investigate. I'm afraid there is something fishy about this." The two of them were still standing there, whispering to each other. The man who had been talking to Yu Qianzhou in the water had already dashed to the side of the ferocious man who had red iron chains wrapped around his upper body. He reported something. The ferocious man said in a deep voice, "Bring him here." Yu Qianzhou and Jiuyu were immediately chased over by the group of red-armored soldiers. They stood in front of the ferocious man. The ferocious man ignored Jiuyu and stared at Yu Qianzhou, sizing him up. Yu Qianzhou's heart thumped, his stomach grumbled, and he cursed his ancestors in his heart. Jiuyu, who was at the side, frowned slightly. After some hesitation, he cupped his fists and said, "I am the great consecrator of the celestial realm's passionless palace, Jiuyu. May I ask if you are one of the Underworld Emperor's 12 Underworld generals, the Red Armored War Army?" The ferocious man was slightly stunned. He looked a little surprised when he turned to look at Jiuyu, as if he didn't expect Jiu to recognize him. He shouted in a deep voice, "My war army has lived in the savage lands for a long time. Back then I had only met Wang Qing of the Passionless Palace. I have never heard of any great consecrator or little consecrator. Why have you barged into my endless horizons? Could it be that you have some ulterior motives?" Chapter 1054. Damn it! Aren't you accusing us wrongly? Who would want to come to your endless netherworld horizon? It was you who forced us out of the river Styx, and now it's us who are up to no good. Xianxia was speechless, but he couldn't figure out this legendary figure's temper, so he didn't dare to be too presumptuous. The two uneasy fellows looked at each other. The other had already admitted that he was the underworld general under the underworld emperor, the Red Armor Warrior. But what puzzled the two was that the other didn't know who xianxia was. Didn't that mean that the other didn't know what happened in Twilight City? It seemed that the other didn't set up this checkpoint to target them. Xianxia immediately wanted to test him. He cupped his fists and bowed, saying, "I am Xianxia, the head of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce in the immortal world. We are just passing through here on the river Styx. We definitely have no bad intentions. Please let us go, General." He wanted to see if the other had heard of him. If not, it would be easy to deal with him. The Red Armor Warrior snorted, "Even a nobody from the immortal world dares to come here. How dare you say you don't have bad intentions? Guards, arrest them and interrogate them." The Red Armor Warriors surrounding the two immediately obeyed. Xianxia waved his hand saying, "Wait." The other party didn't know him, so he wasn't afraid. He took out a black token and showed it to the Red Armor Warrior, saying, "Who dares to touch me? Open your eyes and see what this is." Seeing him take out a fake Underworld Emperor's token, the corner of xianxia's mouth twitched, but he naturally wouldn't expose it. Underworld Emperor's token. The Red Armor Warriors were moved when they saw the thing in his hand, and they were about to pay their respects. However, the Red Armor Warrior waved his hand to stop them. He stared at the token in Xianxia's hand and said disapprovingly, "I have followed the Underworld Emperor for so many years, and I have never heard of him giving the token to an outsider, let alone a small immortal world cultivator like you. Why do I feel that there is something wrong with this Underworld Emperor's token? The more I look at it, the more it looks like a fake." Xianxia's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This red-armored soldier was indeed a trusted subordinate of the Emperor of the Underworld. He could immediately tell that the token of the Emperor of the Underworld was fake. This was going to be a big problem. How could the other side let go of the person who faked the token of the Emperor of the Underworld? Greycloud Xian's right hand had already touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist, just in case. Bullshit. Xianxia almost panicked. He didn't expect the other party to say that. Although he had fooled Xian and Xinyu by saying that the token of the Underworld Emperor was fake in order to avoid their suspicion, he knew that the token of the Underworld Emperor was given to Yuji by the Saintess of the Underworld herself. It couldn't be fake. General, you can't speak carelessly. This is the genuine token of the Emperor of the Netherworld. How can you fake it? You better look carefully before you speak. Otherwise, it will be a great disrespect to the Emperor of the Netherworld. Xianxia shouted. At this moment, Xian only wanted to say 5 words to him. Stubborn. There's no need to argue whether it's real or fake. I have someone here who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in your hand is real or fake. The red-armored soldier looked at him disdainfully and sneered. Take the two of them away. Wait. Xianxia shouted. You really don't know your place. Do you still want to resist? The red-armored soldier's gaze turned cold. We can go with you to verify whether it's real or fake. What if it's real? Xianxia was very confident. If the token in his hand was real, there was no need to be afraid. You dare to bargain with me? You must be tired of living. If you have the real token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in your hand, no one will dare to do anything to you. You can do whatever you want in the endless horizon. According to the red-armored soldier's temper, he wouldn't be so patient. He would have captured the two of them and interrogated them. However, he was here under orders to put on a show, so he couldn't do anything. Xianxia shouted. I'll go with you. I want to see who has the guts to distort the truth and say that the token in my hand is fake. Take them away. The red-armored soldier shouted. Wait. Xianxia tried to delay again. This time, the red-armored soldier's expression was really bad. No one dared to disobey him again and again. He immediately said in a deep voice, What do you want again? I have a friend in the Netherworld River. I have to bring him along. Xianxia didn't care whether he agreed or not. He turned and shouted at the surface of the netherworld river, "Jianghu, come out." Jianghu heard their conversation clearly from below. He flashed out of the netherworld river with a pale face. He had no choice. There was a restriction on his body. He had to follow even if he didn't want to. Actually, Yu Qianzhou didn't want Xinyu to take the risk either. However, the green fire pearl had been planted in Xinyu's body. If the two of them were placed too far apart, it wouldn't be a problem for a short period of time. However, if the two of them were placed too far apart, they would immediately lose control and Xinyu would definitely die. He didn't know where the red armored soldier would take them to verify the authenticity of the Netherworld Emperor's token. He decided to bring Jianghu along for the sake of safety. Just like that, the three of them were surrounded by the Purgatory Army and flew to the depths of the Netherworld River. Along the way, Grey Cloud Xang couldn't help but ask, "Yu Qianzhou, the token in your hand is obviously fake. You still dare to follow them? Once the matter is exposed, we will be trapped in the depths of the endless sea cliff. It will be even more difficult for us to escape. What are you trying to do?" "Don't worry. The quality of the Netherworld Emperor's token is very high. Unless it's the Netherworld Emperor himself, no one will be able to tell it's real. I don't believe that anyone would dare to attack someone with the Underworld Emperor's command medallion without knowing if it's real or fake. How about it?" "You can rest assured," Yu Qianzhou said confidently. "I hope so." Grey Cloud Xiang could only sigh. He felt like he was stuck in a quagmire and couldn't get out of it. However, he had already made up his mind. Once he was at death's door and had nowhere to run, he would kill Yu Qianzhou first to avenge his grandson and himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to die in peace. After coming to the Netherworld, they had long heard of the endless sea cliff. Unfortunately, they didn't have the chance to see it. Even Jianghu only dared to look at it secretly from the Netherworld River. Now that they were overlooking the endless sea cliff from the sky, the three of them were still shocked and terrified. So this was the true face of the endless sea cliff. Scorching red molten lava continuously bubbled up from the ground like a spring, slowly flowing in all directions on the vast land. It was such a shocking scene. The lava field that was as wide as the sea was dyed red and had been rising for many years. Under the red mist, there were crisscrossing paths on the lava field like fields. "Oh, oh." The sorrowful and miserable voices of men and women mixed together and echoed endlessly. Countless men and women were completely naked, stepping on the scorching ground barefoot like slaves, working together to pull the huge iron chains on their shoulders and hands. The other end of the iron chains dragged something that looked like a sieve, filtering something that had gushed out of the ground along with the lava. There were many soldiers of the Purgatory Army in the surroundings who were holding long whips that were covered in thorns. Once they discovered someone slacking off, they would lash out with a whoo sound. Along with the laceration of flesh, miserable screams would resound. The slaves who had been whipped and were physically weak were immediately whipped into the boiling lava by the long whips. They wailed and screamed incessantly in the lava, and their bodies sank into the lava while emitting black smoke. A soldier in charge of law enforcement took out a wooling mirror and shone a beam of white light at the corpses that had sunk into the lava. Immediately, a ray of green light entered the mirror. This kind of scene could be seen at any time during the flight, causing Yu Qianzhou and the other two to feel their blood run cold. In the vast lava field there were also hills and mountainous areas. When they flew over, they could see countless naked men and women mining in the open in the mountains. Similarly, they could also see soldiers carrying long whips mercilessly executing people. Miserable screams still lingered in their ears. What was even more eye-opening was that they could occasionally see neatly dressed women being dragged and thrown into the mountains by the Purgatory Army. It was obvious that they had just been caught after committing some crime. Once such women were thrown, the busy male slaves in the surroundings immediately stopped what they were doing and swarmed over. Amidst the women's screams, their ragged clothes were torn to shreds, and they were stripped in the blink of an eye. A group of dirty men were no different from beasts. They held down the fair-skinned women and rushed to rape them one after another. No one knew how long this would last. What was strange was that the Purgatory soldiers, who were supposed to be strict in law enforcement, turned a deaf ear to them and allowed these men to do as they pleased. It inevitably made people feel that this was the time for these male slaves to rest. The unimaginable scenes they saw along the way made the three of them shudder with fear. The soldiers of the Purgatory Army did not treat the prisoners here as humans at all. In their eyes, they were no different from beasts and pigs. They endlessly tortured the prisoners using all kinds of strange methods, turning this place into a living purgatory that was too horrible to look at. One thing was obvious. Those naked slaves either had their cultivation sealed or had their cultivation crippled. They were forced to do all kinds of heavy labor with their pure physical strength. Also, the lava that emerged from the ground had a suppressive effect on meditation cultivators. It was easy to imagine the suffering they had to endure in such an environment. Xianyu's uncomfortable expression as he flew in the air due to the high temperature. However, what made the three of them feel strange was that these purgatory soldiers were also meditation cultivators, but they did not seem to be affected by the lava at all. The three of them easily suspected that the red armor they were wearing could help them resist the torture of the lava. After flying for half a day, a towering mountain stood like a ferocious giant beast in the red light of the lava in the distance. Flying closer to take a look, the laborers at the foot of the mountain were as dense as ants. Clanking sounds could be heard incessantly, as if they were forging something. In between, the familiar sound of caltrops and whips could be heard incessantly, and screams could be heard one after another. There were countless caves on the mountain with red-armored soldiers going in and out. The whole mountain was like a nest of red ants. As the three of them were observing carefully, the red-armored soldier had already flown to the top of the mountain, where there was a magnificent palace. The others followed closely and landed on the square in front of the palace. Standing on the top of the mountain and looking around quietly, they saw a sea of red light and a red fog rising noisily into the sky, looking magnificent. The miserable screams that kept coming from the foot of the mountain allowed the three of them to understand the meaning of this endless horizon. They understood why the Netherworld's punishment grounds could cause the Netherworld's cultivators to keep quiet out of fear. Presumably, no one would be willing to be sent here. The red-armored soldier glanced at the three of them and then looked at the roof of the palace. The three of them couldn't help but look at the roof. They saw a man dressed like a scholar in white standing on the roof with his hands clasped behind his back and bare feet, motionless with his back to the people on the square and his face to the vast red lava world. The red light filled the sky, and his white robe fluttered in the wind. The three of them were stunned. Even though they had never seen the Emperor of the Underworld with their own eyes, they had heard that the Emperor of the Underworld liked to dress like a scholar in white for a long time. At this moment, they saw a scholar in white standing so leisurely on the roof of a palace in the endless horizon. It was self-evident what it meant. Could this man be the legendary supreme master of the underworld who rarely came out, the Emperor of the Underworld? The three of them felt short of breath. It felt unreal, and they didn't know if they were lucky or unlucky. Xianxia found that the back of this scholar in white was exactly the same as the back of the scholar he had seen in the wall sculpture in the underground palace in the Holy Land, where he had seen the saintess of the underworld for the first time. It was also the back of the scholar, as if the scholar in the wall sculpture had suddenly walked out of his mind. Under such circumstances, the three of them were certain without a doubt that this scholar in white with his back facing them was the underworld emperor who had awed the three realms, the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi. Grey Cloud Xuan and Xianxia suddenly remembered what the red-armored soldier had said earlier. I have someone here who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in your hands is real or fake. The two of them instantly felt bitter when they thought about it. So the person he had mentioned was the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi. They had found the right person. Grey Cloud Xuan and Xianyu slowly turned their heads to look at Xianxia, their eyes filled with despair. After hiding outside for a long time and experiencing some things, he joined the #1 sect in the cultivation world, Fuxian Island. He was expelled from the sect and was hunted by various sections. Then, he became the disciple of the #1 expert in the world by Changchun, until he took charge of the demon domain and became the #1 expert in the human world. Finally, he founded the World Chamber of Commerce in the immortal world. He had been through countless life and death situations along the way. In the past, he would never have dreamed that he would one day be able to stand face to face with the legendary Emperor of the Underworld in the Three Realms. He was able to achieve what he had today by walking step by step. He had experienced life and death so many times, what was there to be afraid of? He gritted his teeth and slowly raised his head to meet the gaze that was staring at him. What entered his eyes was a refined and handsome face with a slight smile. It was completely different from the sinister Emperor of the Underworld he had dreamed of. He couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Was this person really the Emperor of the Underworld who could make the Three Realms tremble? The scholar was also sizing up Xianxia carefully. He wanted to see what kind of person the saintess of the Underworld was talking about was. When he saw that there was no trace of fear in the other party's eyes when he raised his head to look at him, he couldn't help but nod slightly in his heart. Indeed, there was something extraordinary about an extraordinary person. It was rare for a cultivator with the cultivation of a minor immortal to not be afraid when he saw him. What he didn't know was that Xianxia didn't even have the courage to raise his head to look at him. He only managed to raise his head after a torment in his heart. If he had looked at him with a murderous intent, it would be strange if Xianxia wasn't afraid. Perhaps he wouldn't even be able to see Xianxia's figure right now. Most importantly, he came with good intentions. That smile on his face was so harmless and he looked refined and handsome. Women would rush up and kiss him when they saw him. Who would be afraid? Xianxia. This is the second time we've met. The scholar was the first to speak with a slight smile. It was the first time for Xuanhuan and Xinyu to meet the Emperor of the Underworld. They didn't expect him to be such a handsome young man with such an amiable smile. It was truly beyond their expectations. Subconsciously they felt a lot more at ease. Seeing that the Emperor of the Underworld had spoken, they couldn't hear a single word clearly. They guessed that there might be some sort of soundproofing barrier set up on the roof. The red-armored soldier was also stunned. He had never seen the Emperor of the Underworld being so amiable to a foreign cultivator, especially a celestial cultivator. However, why did the Underworld Saintess say something that distorted the truth? From what the scholar had said, it seemed that the Underworld Saintess had intentionally concealed the fact that he was from the human world. Could it be that she was trying to protect him? But why was that? Could it be that she had fallen in love with him at first sight? But it seemed that his current appearance was not good enough for a woman to fall in love with him at first sight. Not long after the Underworld Saintess told me this, Jintai suddenly came to the royal palace of the Underworld and asked me why I gave you the Underworld's token. The scholar immediately told Xianxia what he had told Jintai that day. This was the reason why he didn't care about his status as the Emperor of the Underworld and asked someone to trick Xianxia into meeting him. He wanted to let Xianxia know that he had helped him before so that Xianxia would remember this big favor. What the hell were they doing? Xianxia scratched his head in confusion. He was no longer nervous, but he said with a wry smile, Emperor of the Underworld, this junior can't figure out why you helped me like this. It seems that this junior's ability is not worthy of your kindness. It's right that you can't figure it out. If I could figure it out, then I, the Emperor of the Underworld, would be too despicable to come here and curry favor with you. The scholar immediately laughed heartily. His thin white robe wrapped tightly around his body in the wind, giving him a feeling that he was floating in the air. He appeared to be exceptionally elegant and refined. This surprised Xuanhuan and Jianghu and the red-armored soldiers below, not knowing why the Emperor of the Underworld was so happy. He waved his hand disapprovingly, saying, You are too serious. It's not a kindness. Since the Underworld Saintess thinks so highly of you, how can I undermine her? Naturally, I have to do my best to help you. Otherwise, as an immortal, you dare to use my Underworld Emperor's token to show off outside, let alone help you block Jintai. Do you really think you can avoid my eyes and ears by hiding in the Underworld River? Once I give the order, how can the water tribe of the Underworld not give me face? If I want to deal with you, I can make it difficult for you to move an inch in the Underworld River at any time. If I want to catch you, it will be a piece of cake. Do you think you can hide until today? As he spoke, he laughed coldly and said, Actually, your movements in the Netherworld River have always been within my grasp. It's just a matter of time and place for me to catch you. Otherwise, why do you think the Purgatory Army coincidentally intercepted you in the Netherworld River? Do you really think you are catching a fugitive from the endless horizon? It's because I happened to come here for something. He smiled coldly and said, Do you think that I am making a deal with you? In the three realms, if I want to do something, I only need to say the word and someone will do it. If I want something, someone will naturally deliver it to me. Do you think that with your current ability, you are qualified to be ordered around by me? I'm only helping you because I am happy. Don't think too highly of yourself. Damn it. You don't have to be so direct. You should at least give me some face. Xianxia stood there awkwardly. When he thought about it, he felt that the scholar was right. The scholar didn't have anything he wanted, and his subordinates were as many as the clouds. He also had countless subordinates. Whatever he wanted to do, he could settle it with just a word. Xianxia really wasn't qualified to be ordered around by the scholar. It seemed like he was indeed thinking too much. Seeing that Jianghu had already been convinced by him, the scholar felt it was funny. However, on the surface he asked calmly, Let me ask you, what are you doing here instead of cultivating and improving your own cultivation? Xianxia immediately smiled bitterly and said, Actually, this junior was forced to do so. Just as the Underworld Saintess said, this junior didn't know that this was the Underworld token. When I took it out, even I was shocked, thinking that I had gotten into trouble. To tell you the truth, Emperor of the Underworld, the few of us fled here for our lives. He wanted to say that he was here to collect information, but he reckoned that he wouldn't be able to fool the other party. He might as well just admit that he was a coward. You are just an ignorant junior. I don't have time to waste on you. The scholar waved his hand and retracted the soundproof barrier. He then said calmly to the people below, Jianghu, let them go. After saying this, he disappeared from the roof. A streak of white light moved as fast as lightning, disappearing into the distant horizon in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1056. Seeing the Emperor of the Underworld fly away, Xianxia felt depressed. He had wanted to strike while the iron was hot and form a relationship with the Emperor of the Underworld. Who would have thought that the Emperor of the Underworld would leave without any warning? Little did he know that the Emperor of the Underworld would shamelessly come here to express his goodwill. For someone who was used to being in a superior position, it was already very awkward. Although he still maintained his demeanor on the surface, he was extremely embarrassed and did not have the face to stay here any longer. Hearing that the Emperor of the Underworld would let them go, Xuanhuan and Xianyu were overjoyed. They did not know what Xianxia had said to the Emperor of the Underworld to let them pass safely. The red-armored soldier also looked at Xianxia with a puzzled expression. He also wanted to know what the Emperor of the Underworld had said to Xianxia, but it was not convenient for him to ask about the Emperor of the Underworld. He could only snort coldly and say, "You guys are lucky today. Get out." Xianxia stood on the roof and looked at the red-armored soldier below. He still felt like he was dreaming. He did not expect to see the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, under such circumstances. He did not expect Bai Qi to reward him. It was too unexpected. Hearing Jianghu telling them to scram, Xianxia looked towards the distance where the red light filled the sky. He casually took out his flying shuttle and jumped on it. Gray Cloud Xian and Xinyu understood his intention and flashed up. The three of them saluted the red-armored soldiers below. Afterwards, Ash Cloud Xian took over the flying shuttle without any complaints and quickly drove it away. Standing on the square above the sea of lava, the red-armored soldier looked in the direction they were going. His eyes were filled with confusion. He mumbled to himself, "They are going there. Did the Emperor of the Underworld give them a mission?" The flying shuttle flew across the sky. Below them was still the sea of lava. The screams from time to time could no longer attract the attention of the three people above. Xuanhuan stood at the front of the flying shuttle. After a while, he could not help but ask, Xianxia, is the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in your hand real? Of course it's fake. But if the Underworld Emperor says it's real, then it's real. Xianxia let out a sigh of relief and said, "It's all good now. We can use the endless horizon to directly enter the mysterious forbidden area. There shouldn't be any danger on this trip." This was not what Gray Cloud Xian wanted to hear. He was shocked to see the Underworld Emperor safe and sound. After a moment of silence, he asked again, "What did the Underworld Emperor tell you?" "Old song. This is related to the Emperor of the Underworld, so it's really inconvenient to divulge it." Then they heard Jiyu choking on his sobs and muttering to himself, "I'm back. After 150,000 years. I'm finally back." Although the voice was soft, the two of them could hear it clearly at such a close distance. Surprised, they couldn't help but look at their surroundings. The two sides of the Netherworld River were empty plains that were like the Gobi Desert. Not a single undulation could be seen, and the Netherworld River below them was at most 100 meters wide. "Jiyu, you used to cultivate here?" Xianxia asked suspiciously. Jiyu was shocked and realized that he had lost his composure. He panicked and suddenly remembered something. He suddenly stood up and shouted at the two of them, "Slow down. Slow down, it's very dangerous here." Not only did he slow down, Gray Cloud Xian directly stopped the flying shuttle in the air. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Jiyu, what's going on?" "This area is the isolation zone between the Netherworld and the mysterious forbidden area. Don't think that it's peaceful here. In fact, it's full of danger. The invisible and mysterious power that can tear everything apart can appear in the air at any time. It's very powerful. Even the immortal Emperor of the Immortal World and the Netherworld Emperor of the Netherworld don't dare to trespass here." Jiyu pointed at the Netherworld River in front and below. In this isolation zone, whether it's on land or in the water, even underground, there are no living creatures. It's because they can't survive the invisible and mysterious power. Xianxia and Gray Cloud Xian looked at each other. No wonder no one dared to trespass the forbidden area of the Netherworld. It was because of this reason. However, the two of them had suspicions in their eyes. Xianxia touched his chin and sneered. "Jiyu, do you think the two of us are fools or idiots? Since no living creatures can survive here, Why were you able to cultivate here in the past? You should be punished. Grey Cloud XN stared at Jiyu and shouted coldly. Looks like we can't let him live anymore. Otherwise, who knows what traps are waiting for us ahead. After all, we're not familiar with this place at all. Yu Qianqiu frowned and looked at Jiyu, but he didn't object. Jiyu looked at the two of them and smiled bitterly. I won't hide it from you now. Actually, you've misunderstood. This isn't the place where I cultivated in the past. As he said that, he raised his hand and pointed ahead along the Netherworld River. He sighed. Follow this Netherworld River straight ahead. With Elder Tsang's flying speed, it won't take more than a day for you to see a waterfall that flows down from a tall mountain. I came down from that waterfall back then. As long as we cross that tall mountain, we'll reach the legendary forbidden area of the Netherworld. And I am from the so-called mysterious forbidden area of the Netherworld. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xian were stunned. Both of them had suspected that this fellow was hiding some sort of secret, but none of them had imagined that this fellow's origins would be so strange. He was actually from the mysterious Netherworld forbidden area, and it was too inconceivable. Grey Cloud Xian's throat moved and he said with some difficulty in a threatening tone, You're not lying to us, are you? There's no need. I want to go back alive, so there's no need to lie to you. There was a trace of nostalgia hidden in Jiuyu's lonely expression. He looked ahead and sighed faintly. More than 1,000,000 years ago I was born in a lake there. I was ignorant and carefree. Only after 500,000 years did my spiritual wisdom appear. Another 500,000 years later, I was lucky enough to find the way of cultivation. It only took me 50,000 years to cultivate to the early stage of Underworld Lord. Just when I broke through to the early stage of Netherworld Venerable, which was 150,000 years ago, I was suddenly possessed and wanted to see the outside world. Therefore, I followed the small river that connected the lake and finally stood on the waterfall. I hesitated for a long time, but in the end I couldn't help but go with the flow. In the end I came to the so-called Netherworld River. Who knew that the outside world was extremely dangerous? It was the first time I met the water tribe in the Netherworld River. They wanted to take my life because of a disagreement. I was so scared that I fled in a panic. I ran far away before I got out of danger. After that, I didn't want to stay outside anymore. I wanted to go back to where I left. But my fate was really full of misfortune. Every time I wanted to go back the way I came, I would always encounter some dangerous things. It was as if God was playing a joke on me. It worked every time. Not only did I fail to come back, but I was also getting further and further away from where I wanted to go. Just like that, I spent 150,000 years in the river Styx with nowhere to go. I thought that I would never be able to return in this lifetime. I left home so far away and experienced so many dangers. I no longer had the courage to return because I was too scared to try again. Until I met you too. It was the first time I had the courage to taste the flesh of a human in the immortal world. Who knew that I was as unlucky as ever? You know what happened next? I never dreamed that I would be able to come back here in this lifetime. There was such an unlucky guy in this world? Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xian looked at each other. While they felt it was unbelievable, they also sighed for Jiyu's fate. Songyun Xian looked ahead and asked with a frown, I don't know what's so mysterious about this Netherworld Forbidden Land. Jiyu, what's in the Forbidden Land? This. Jiyu hesitated for a while and smiled bitterly. I didn't think that place was mysterious before, but after coming out and getting in touch with the outside world, I realized that it's a place far away from the three realms. There were quite a few tombs scattered about. If one were to ask whose tombs they were, using the language of the three realms, those tombs were the tombs of gods. Dead gods were buried there. The so-called Forbidden Land of the Netherworld is actually a vast mausoleum of the gods. Chapter 1057. The Tomb of the God of Sin. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xian exclaimed in unison. Their eyes were wide open and they almost spat out their tongues. They had all kinds of speculations about the Forbidden Land of the Underworld, but they never dreamed that the so-called mysterious Forbidden Land was actually the mausoleum of the God of Sin, the resting place of the dead gods. Don't be surprised. It's really the mausoleum of the God of Sin. I didn't lie to you, Xinyu assured them again. The two of them didn't think that Xinyu was lying to them, they just thought it was too unbelievable. After digesting this shocking news, Yu Qianqiu stared at him with sparkling eyes and asked in a deep voice, From what you said, you seem to have a way to pass through this dangerous isolation zone and return to the forbidden area? Yes. Xinyu nodded. Xinyu, I understand what you mean. You want me to remove the restriction spell in your body and let you go home. Yu Qianqiu said firmly, I can remove the restriction spell in your body, but only if you bring us in. What? Before Xuanhu could answer, Xuanhuan exclaimed, You Qianqiu, you must be tired of living. If it's really the mausoleum of the god of sin, how can we barge in with our cultivation? Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and said, You don't have to go in and wait for me here. But since I'm here and there's a great opportunity in front of me, how can I not go in and broaden my horizons? You're completely crazy. You're a lunatic. Xuanhuan's expression twitched. Yu Qianqiu had his own purpose and didn't bother to argue with him. He continued to ask Xuanhu, what do you think? Xuanhu was quite hesitant. He didn't know if he should bring an outsider in. Was it up to him? After some consideration, he gritted his teeth and said, Fine. As long as you remove the restriction spell in my body, I'll bring you in. Then it's settled. However, you can't let your guard down. I can't remove the seal in your body right now. You'll have to wait until I'm safely inside, Yu Qianqiu said bluntly. Xuanhuan gritted his teeth once more and said, Yu Qianqiu, don't blame me for not reminding you. You and I don't know anything about the situation inside, so you have to consider clearly whether it's worth the risk. Yu Qianqiu frowned. Xuanhuan's words were not wrong. Although he was worried about Bai Changchun's life and death, it was not wise to blindly take the risk. He paused and said, Xuanhu, tell me honestly, is there any danger in the forbidden area? If you dare to lie to me, you'll have to bear the consequences. I'm not a soft-hearted person. Think carefully before you speak. Xuanhu sighed slightly and said, It's impossible to say that there's no danger at all. Most of the gods who died had loyal subordinates when they were alive, and most of them would have someone guarding their mausoleum after they died. They guarded the mausoleum of the gods they were loyal to and generally did not care about others. As long as we know our place and do not trespass into the area they were guarding, nothing will happen. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and looked around before asking, You said that Jin Tai and Bai Qi did not dare to trespass this isolation zone with their cultivation, but you, a mere underworld supremacy, can come and go as you please. Is there a secret passage here? There's no secret passage. Jiu pondered and shook his head. Actually, I don't know the reason either. Others would be crushed to pieces by that mysterious power here, but when I encounter that mysterious power, it always turns from majestic to gentle, like a gentle breeze brushing past me. I still can't figure out why. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that I was born inside and the people inside. There was such a strange thing. The two people beside him looked at each other and looked at Xuanhu suspiciously, as if they wanted to see something different about him. However, they were not that observant. After a moment of silence, Yu Qianqiu waved at Xuanhu and said, Bring me in. Wait. Xuanhuan shouted and stared at Yu Qianqiu. He snorted and said, Once you remove the restriction on him inside, you will no longer be able to restrain him. Even if there's no danger inside, have you thought about how you're going to pass through this isolation zone when you come back? I'm afraid you'll never be able to come back. He had no choice but to be careful. Now that Yu Qianqiu's life was related to his life, the immortal palace might even find an excuse to attack the passionless palace. Even if he could hide in the netherworld and not go back, ignoring the existence of the heartless palace, if the heartless palace was really destroyed, he, Grey Cloud Xian, would lose his backing to deter others. It would be very difficult for him to survive in the netherworld alone. At the same time, the immortal palace would not allow him to hide in the netherworld and live comfortably. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He did not think about this at all because it was not a problem for him at all. He could leave whenever he wanted to. Xuanhu smiled bitterly and said, Then what does Mr. Tsang want? Send us out safely and then let him remove the restriction on you. Xuanhuan narrowed his eyes. Yu Qianqiu was stunned again. Didn't you say you wouldn't go in? Xuanhuan looked around, then glanced at him and said, Since there is no danger inside and it's a rare opportunity to see the mausoleum of the god of sin, why not go in and have a look? He said this against his will. In fact, he did not want to go in at all, but he did not have the courage to stay in this damn place alone. Who knew if he would run into that mysterious power? Moreover, he did not know when Yu Qianqiu would come back. It should be known that the longer he stayed, the more likely it was that he would run into it. If he did not wait for Yu Qianqiu to come out, he did not dare to go back alone. He did not dare to believe that the three of them could make it all the way here. At least, he was not confident that he could return the way he came from. All along the way, Yu Qianqiu had repeatedly turned danger into safety, causing him to feel that it was safer to be by Yu Qianqiu's side. In short, in the end, it was a fact that he wasn't willing to admit. He was afraid. What if after I send you out, you don't help me remove the restriction in my body? Jianghu said with a bitter face. He could not help but worry. What if these two fellows saw that he could enter and exit the forbidden area at will and wanted to take him as their exclusive property? That was a very likely possibility. Xuanhuan immediately sneered and said, "You have no choice. You have to agree whether you want to or not. Otherwise, I will make it so that you will never be able to go back." Xianxia looked at him in pain. This was clearly a threat. If he did not agree, he would kill him. Jianghu looked helpless. He really had no choice but to resign himself to fate. He said sadly, "I agree." His goal was achieved. Xuanhuan snorted and did not speak. Xianxia patted Jianghu's shoulder and comforted him. "Don't worry. I Xianxia am a man of my word. Before I leave this place, I will remove the restriction in your body and let you go back safely. What do we do now?" In fact, this place was more difficult than ascending to heaven for others, but it was not a problem for Jianghu. He asked Xianxia to put away the flying shuttle and revealed his true form again. He opened his clamshell and wrapped the two of them inside. Then he dove into the river Styx below and continued to move quickly along the river Styx. In less than half an hour, Jianghu, who was moving quickly in the water, constantly felt the mysterious and terrifying power crushing and tearing at him. From time to time, his huge clamshell would shine with a gorgeous light. Whenever the mysterious and terrifying power encountered the light, it would slip past his body. The further they went, the more frequent the mysterious power appeared. As they encountered it more frequently, the faint light on Jianghu's body flickered non-stop. In the end, the light on his body was like a lamp that would never be extinguished. It was obvious that the mysterious power had completely filled this space. It was impossible to sneak past it. 3 days. With Xuanhuan's cultivation, driving the flying shuttle would not take more than a day. However, Jianghu took a full 3 days. In front of them, a 1,000-meter-tall mountain appeared. The entire mountain extended endlessly to the left and right like a tall great wall. The mountain faced the river Styx, and there was a huge waterfall that looked like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. From the top of the mountain, one could hear the loud sound of water falling. The water of the river Styx came from it. Jianghu, who was rapidly approaching, shot out of the huge pool that the waterfall created at the foot of the mountain. He went against the flow of the waterfall and soon reached the top of the waterfall. From below, it looked like a mountain, but when he reached the top, he saw a plain with a river flowing on it. "We're here. You can come out now." Jianghu's voice was very excited. He slowly floated out of the water and opened his huge clamshell. After 2 figures flashed to the shore, he also turned into his human form and went to the shore. The sound of flowing water came from beside the 3 of them. The waterfall was not far from their feet. Jianghu knelt on the ground and covered his face with his hands as he sobbed, "I'm really back." Xianxia and Xuanhuan, on the other hand, looked at their surroundings dumbfounded. The direction in which the waterfall flowed was like a black curtain falling from the sky. They could vaguely see the mountains and rivers below. It was the netherworld that they had come from. On the mountain, behind them, upstream of the river, with the edge of the mountain as the boundary, there was a strange scene that was clearly separated from the foot of the mountain. Although the mountain and the foot of the mountain both looked like it was night, it was like 2 different worlds. The night at the foot of the mountain was forever immersed in endless darkness, but the night at the top of the mountain was filled with twinkling stars. There was also a bright moon hanging in the night sky. The white moonlight shone on the ground like mercury, allowing everything to be seen clearly. Xianxia and Xuanhuan's mouths were wide open as they looked up at the bright moon in the sky. This moon was not like the moon they had seen in the mortal world or the immortal world. It was dozens or even hundreds of times bigger than the moon they had seen before. The huge moon hanging in the sky was terrifying. Chapter 1058. If one looked closely, they would find that the deep ravines on the moon seemed to be faintly visible. Such a huge moon hanging in the sky gave people the feeling that it would fall at any time. The sound of the waterfall mixed with Jianghu's joyful cries after his return. Coupled with the sky full of stars and the huge and scary moon, it gave the two an inexplicable strange feeling. After a while, Jianghu recovered from his excitement and slowly stood up, wiping the tears on his face. Xianxia coughed and pointed at the big moon in the sky. "Jianghu, is that really the moon in the sky?" "Of course it's the moon." Jianghu looked up at the moon and sighed. 150,000 years ago, after I left the mountain, I couldn't get used to not seeing the moon in the sky. So when I first met the water tribe of the river Styx, I asked them where the moon was. They thought I was playing with them, so they chased me and tried to kill me. Zhu Qianshou turned around and looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. Yu Qianshou couldn't help but roll his eyes. There are no sun, moon, and stars in the netherworld, let alone such a big moon. You asked them where the moon was in the sky. It would be strange if they didn't think you were playing with them. You deserve to be killed. That's right. Jiu sighed. But I've never left this place before, so how would I know there's no moon in the netherworld? Now that I think about it, maybe I ended up like this because I asked about the moon. Otherwise I would have come back long ago. The corner of Yu Qianshou's mouth twitched. He seemed to vaguely remember a saying in his previous life, "It's all the moon's fault." It couldn't be more suitable to be used on this unlucky guy. He patted his shoulder and comforted him. You can't blame yourself for this. It's all the moon's fault. Let bygones be bygones. Now that you're finally back, just treat it as going out to see the world. If you hadn't wandered outside for 150,000 years, how would you know there's no moon in the netherworld? Pfft. Zhu Qianshou couldn't help but scoff. He had never seen anyone comforting someone like this. It was no different from provoking someone. Sure enough, Xinyu's expression twitched as he said, "If it takes 150,000 years just to find out if the netherworld has a moon, then I'd rather not know if the netherworld has a moon. If I could cultivate here peacefully for 150,000 years, I might have broken through to the underworld emperor period." Damn it. Then you can slowly regret it. What does it have to do with me? Yu Qianshou had a feeling that his good intentions had been treated as malicious intent. He pointed to the depths of the plain and asked in annoyance, "Where should we go next?" Jiu looked at the flowing river and murmured, "I naturally want to go to where I came from, which is the source of this river." Yu Qianshou looked at the waterfall under his feet. His eyes lit up as he said, "In other words, you lived at the source of the river Styx?" Grey Cloud Xan looked at Xinyu curiously. You can say that." Jiu looked at the two and asked, "Are you going to my place?" "It's my honor to have the opportunity to see the source of the river Styx that nurtured the entire river Styx water tribe. How long will it take to get to your place?" Yu Qianshou asked. "I came down along this river in less than a month." Jiu looked at Grey Cloud Xn and said, "With Sinecure Tsang's speed, it shouldn't take more than 10 days. 10 days? Yu Qianshou thought for a while and shook his head. "That's too long. I came here to look for someone. If I can't find him, I have to hurry back to the celestial world to attend the celestial emperor's wedding." "Look for someone?" Grey Cloud Xn and Xinyu were speechless. Grey Cloud Xn sneered and said, "Yu Qianshou, are you kidding me? You came here to look for someone? Don't tell me you have an acquaintance here?" Yu Qianshou said after some thought, "I heard that there was an expert who fought a great battle with the underworld emperor. In the end, the expert fled here while being hunted by the underworld emperor. I am here to find him." He didn't want to tell them about this because he didn't think he could really break into the forbidden area of the underworld. However, he needed Xinyu's help to find Bai Changchun. After all, he was unfamiliar with this place, so he had to tell Xinyu who he was looking for. He couldn't let Jiu search aimlessly. The expert in the human world, Bai Changchun, who challenged the emperor of the netherworld. Jiu was shocked. Grey Cloud Xn was also suspicious and said, "Why are you looking for him?" "There is naturally a reason why I am looking for him. As for why I am looking for him, once we find him, you will naturally know." Yu Qianshou waved his hand. It was certainly not convenient to tell these two the truth. Grey Cloud Xn sneered. "I've long suspected that there's something wrong with your collection. You really have other intentions. I've accompanied you all the way here in vain." "Old song. It's not nice of you to say that. If you hadn't followed me all the way here, would you have had the chance to come to the forbidden area of the underworld? Many people want to come here but don't have the luck." Yu Qianshou pointed to the big moon in the sky and said, "If you hadn't followed me all the way here, would you have had the chance to come to the forbidden area of the underworld to see such a big moon? Even Immortal Emperor Jin Tai and Emperor of the Netherworld Bai Qi have not seen something like this. How many people can you find in the 3 realms? I'm afraid there isn't anyone except the 3 of us here. So you should thank me for bringing you here to feast your eyes." "Nonsense." Grey Cloud Xn flicked his sleeve and turned his head away. He sneered. "Jiu is unlucky because he didn't see the big moon when he left here. I hope you and I won't be unlucky because we came here and saw the big moon." "Don't worry. Long live I won't be unlucky. The one who will be unlucky is you," Yu Qianshou retorted. Grey Cloud Xn snorted and didn't say anything. After spending so much time together, he knew that this guy had a sharp tongue. He would be in the wrong if they continued arguing, so he didn't say anything. Seeing that the two of them had stopped arguing, Xinyu scratched his head and said, "That Bai Changchun's cultivation level is not bad, but it is still far from Bai Qi and Jintai's cultivation level. If even the two of them can't come in, then that Bai Changchun can't come in either. Moreover, I heard that he was severely injured by the Emperor of the Netherworld. If I'm not wrong, that Bai Changchun should have died in the quarantine zone, so there is no need to find him." Bullsh*t. Yu Qianzhou shouted angrily. He pointed at Xinyu and said, "You better pray that he is alive. Otherwise you won't be able to live either." Xinyu was startled. He exchanged a look with Grey Cloud Xian. He didn't know why this guy suddenly turned on him. Grey Cloud Xian snorted coldly and said, "Don't bother with him. This guy is a complete lunatic. Don't talk nonsense in front of me." Yu Qianzhou pointed at his head and said with a ferocious expression, "Jiu is dead. You won't be able to leave this place alive. Just stay here and guard the mausoleum for those dead gods. You must have taken the wrong medicine." Grey Cloud Xian's expression turned cold. He said indifferently, "You won't be able to get out even if Jiu is dead. I'm warning you, before we leave this place you better not touch him. Otherwise I will cut off my way out. Since I can't get out, I will kill you first to avenge my grandson." "You can try," Yu Qianzhou said sternly. Grey Cloud Xian immediately retorted, "Then you can try. Let's see if I dare to kill you or not." The two of them were at each other's throats again. Jiu stood there with a bitter expression. In short, he was the unluckiest one. Even if Grey Cloud Xian killed Yu Qianzhou, he would also be unlucky. He sighed and said, "Then try your best to find him. If you really can't find him, there's nothing I can do." This finally made Yu Qianzhou feel better. He snorted coldly and said, "This is such a big place. Where do we start? How are we going to find him? I don't know which direction Bai Changchun came from. Anyway, he has to jump over this cliff. Let's search along this cliff and ask someone along the way," Jiu said helplessly. Yu Qianzhou looked around and asked suspiciously, "Who should we ask? The dead in the mausoleum definitely can't speak. Of course, we'll look for the living guarding the mausoleum." Xinyu looked ahead and said, "I remember there are 2 adjacent mausoleums less than half a day from here. I know the people guarding the mausoleum, but I don't know if Grandma Yen is still there. After all, 150,000 years have passed." "All right." Yu Qianzhou casually took out his flying artifact and the three of them flashed on it. Then Yu Qianzhou coughed and said, "Old Song, your cultivation is higher, so you should control it. That way we can save some time." He had just fallen out with the other party, and now he immediately asked for help. He really had to put down his pride. People with thin skin would not be able to do that. Fortunately, Grey Cloud Xian did not want to waste time when the situation was unclear. He snorted coldly and looked at Yu Qianzhou with disdain. In the end he still took over. Following the direction that Xinyu pointed, the flying shuttle flew quickly. It took less than half a day for Xinyu, and even less time for Grey Cloud Xian. In less than 4 hours, a mountain range began to appear under the silver moonlight. Under Xinyu's guidance, Grey Cloud Xian slowed down and slowly flew toward a mountain that looked like the head of a monster. When they got closer, they could see that what looked like the eyes of 2 monsters were actually 2 bulging tombs. The 2 tombs were made of unknown dark red crystals, and they did not reflect light at all under the moonlight. Each of them was about 100 square meters and they were less than 10 meters tall. And at the head of the monster mountain, there was a small single-family manor built with local materials and stones. Yu Qianzhou and Grey Cloud Xian looked at each other anxiously. After putting away the flying shuttle, Xinyu flew to the front and said loudly, "Is Grandma Yen here? Xiaosu is here to see you." In the silence, there was suddenly an "oh" in the silent stone manor. I was wondering who it was. "It's Xiaosu. You haven't been here for many years. I thought you had forgotten about me." Chapter 1059. It was an old woman's voice, calm and indifferent. Soon after, a gray-clothed old woman slowly walked out of the house. Her snow-white hair was tied up behind her head, and her face was covered in wrinkles. However, she was very spirited. She walked into the small courtyard with her back straight. She curiously looked at Yu Qianzhou and Sangyun Xen, who were in the air. "This old woman's cultivation is very high. I can't see through her cultivation." Sangyun Xen secretly transmitted his voice to Yu Qianzhou. He could tell that she was nervous. Nonsense. She came down from the divine world to guard the tomb. It would be strange if her cultivation was low. Yu Qianzhou replied secretly. Both of them could tell that this woman was not a meditation cultivator. Under Xianyu's guidance, the three of them landed outside the courtyard. They didn't land directly inside as a sign of respect. Once the three of them walked into the courtyard, Xianyu quickly stepped forward and bowed. Xiao Su greets Granny Yan. Yu Qianqiu followed suit and bowed. Yu Qianqiu greets Granny Yan. He was a polite person. He secretly looked at the environment of the courtyard and realized that it was too simple. He guessed that a person with such a state of mind wouldn't be a bad person, so he relaxed a lot. Xuanhuan's mouth twitched. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu. It didn't seem right for him to stand there alone. Hence he followed suit and bowed. Xuanhuan greets Granny Yan. Granny Yan glanced at the two of them and didn't pay much attention to them. She looked at Xianyu and sighed. Time flies. I don't know how long it has been since I lived here alone. Xiao Su, we haven't seen each other for at least 100,000 years, right? Why did you bring two strangers with you today? Why are you looking for me? Let me make this clear. Even if we are old acquaintances, I won't go out to do anything for you. You should know this. Xianyu smiled bitterly. I remember Granny's words. You once said that the other tomb guard who lived with you in the past had divined for you. He told you not to go out and get involved with any karma. Otherwise the tomb will be destroyed and you will die. As long as you remember. At this moment, a smile appeared on Granny Yan's face. She looked at Xianyu again and said with a smile, You haven't made any progress in your cultivation after so many years. Looks like you've been slacking off. But it's good too. You'll be more at ease with a lower cultivation, and you won't cause any trouble for yourself. The person lying here in eternal sleep is a good example. Xianyu did not know whether to laugh or cry. It's not that I'm slacking off, it's just that I haven't had the chance to cultivate all these years. I've been running for my life, so my cultivation hasn't improved much. Yu Qianqiu and Xuanhuan stood behind him without saying a word. In fact, there was no room for them to interrupt. Escape? Grandma Yan was slightly taken aback and asked in astonishment, What did you do? Most of the people who are willing to guard the tomb here are people who have gotten rid of all distracting thoughts. Very few people would have the thought of fighting and killing again. Could it be that you have committed a great taboo and touched someone's tomb? Xiaoyu doesn't even know about this taboo. It's really a long story. Xianyu shook his head and said with a bitter smile, I couldn't help but run out along that river because of a moment of impulse. As a result, I've caused many disasters and haven't found a chance to return. In fact, I've just returned from outside. You can actually pass through the heavenly barrier? How is that possible? Granny Yan let out a breath of cold air. Then, as if it had nothing to do with her, she regained her calmness. However, she seemed to have thought of something and tried to ask, Xiaosu, since you've been outside, have you heard of a girl called Taishu Xian? A girl called Taishu Xian? Xianyu was stunned. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and said, I've never heard of her. Who is she? Yu Qianqiu, who was at the side, also thought about it. He had heard of the ancestor of all demons, Taishu Zheng, but he was a man. As for Taishu Xian's woman, he had never heard of it. As he thought about it, he tilted his head to look at Xuanhuan. Coincidentally, Xuanhuan also looked at him with a questioning look. Both of them immediately understood that no one had heard of her. She's the girl who lived with me and guarded the tomb together. Forget it. Since you don't know, forget it. Grandma Yan waved her hand and glanced at the other two. Xiaoyu, why did you bring two strangers to me? Xianyu was afraid of causing a misunderstanding, so he immediately cupped his hands and said, They are my friends. We're looking for someone and we're here to ask Grandma about this person. Then you found the wrong person. Grandma Yan shook her head and said, I rarely leave this mountain and almost never go out. I've cut off any contact with the outside world. How would I know the person you're looking for? As soon as she said that, Yu Qianqiu's face darkened slightly. Xianyu glanced at him and asked with a last glimmer of hope, The person we're looking for also broke in from the outside. It shouldn't have been too long since he broke in. With Grandma's cultivation, you should be able to sense if someone passed by here. Could it be? I'll naturally tell you if I know. Grandma Yan raised her hand and interrupted him, I haven't spoken so much for a long time. I'm not used to it. She suddenly paused and frowned. The person who broke in from the outside not long ago? She seemed to have thought of something. Yu Qianqiu immediately became excited, but Grey Cloud XN secretly transmitted a voice message to stop him. Yu Qianqiu, don't interrupt. Grandma Yan's cultivation is unfathomable, and she doesn't seem to be interested in us. Don't annoy her. Let Xianyu take his time. There's no hurry. Yu Qianzhou thought about it and held back. That's right. Xinyu said excitedly, Grandma, do you remember? It's been a long time since I've thought about things. My brain isn't working well. However, Xiaoyu reminded me of something. Grandma Yan pondered and said slowly, not long ago, old man Meng, who was guarding the tomb in the south, suddenly came to me angrily and asked me if I had seen an old man in a green robe. I asked him what was going on, and he said that he met an old man in a green robe not long ago. The old man passed by and asked him where this place was. After he told the old man the truth, who knew that the old man would bite the hand that fed him and set his eyes on his master's tomb. He said that he wanted to see how the god buried in the tomb was different from ordinary people. As a result, he angered old man Meng and the two of them fought. The old man was only at the intermediate immortal emperor stage, while old man Meng was at the early minor god stage. Of course, the old man was no match for old man Meng, but he was quite good at escaping. Under old man Meng's pursuit, the old man managed to escape into the barrier of heavens. Yu Qianzhou's heart was pounding when he heard this. He thought that it must be that old man. Other than old man Bai, who else would dare to dig up the god's tomb to see what the dead god looked like? In addition to the green robe and the ability to escape, it must be old man Bai. He's still alive. I told you that he wouldn't die so easily. Yu Qianzhou was excited. Song Yunxin had also heard of the appearance of the person who challenged the emperor of the underworld. It was an old man in a green robe. Now that he heard Granny Yan's words, he could roughly guess that it was the Bai Changchun that Yu Qianzhou was looking for. He didn't expect that the guy who had been seriously injured by the emperor of the underworld was still alive, and he was as arrogant as ever. He even wanted to dig up the tomb of the god of sin in front of the tomb keeper whose cultivation was obviously higher than his, knowing that it was the tomb of the god of sin. Wasn't he looking for a fight? Madman. That guy was definitely a complete madman. Of course, Xinyu had also heard of the Bai Changchun who caused a stir in the netherworld. He knew that he was the person he was looking for. When he heard that Bai Changchun was still alive, he immediately asked, Granny, you mean that the person entered the all-heavens boundary and returned to the outside world? Granny Yin shook her head slightly and said, Old Meng also thought that the guy knew that he was no match for him and escaped. Who knew that when Old Meng came back from a trip, he suddenly found that the man in the green robe came back again. Moreover, looking at the situation of the man standing by the tomb, it seemed that he was going to dig up the tomb. Old Meng was almost angered to death, so he rushed up and fought with the man in the green robe again. In the end, he still couldn't control the man in the green robe and let him escape into the all-heavens boundary. Old Meng, who had always been gentle, was so angry that he stood in front of the all-heavens boundary and cursed. The man in the green robe seemed to have made up his mind to dig up the tomb to see what the god inside looked like. When the first time didn't work, he came a second time and a third time. Even Old Meng himself couldn't remember how many times they fought. In the end, Old Meng suddenly realized that the man in the green robe seemed to be addicted to fighting with him. It seemed that he was using him to train himself. Later, Old Meng figured out the pattern of the man's every time he came, so he ambushed the man in the green robe and didn't give him a chance to escape back into the all-heavens boundary. But in the end, he still lost the man in the pursuit. It was not easy for Old Meng to force the man to not have a chance to escape back into the all-heavens boundary. Naturally, he wouldn't give up easily. Otherwise, he would be annoyed to death in the future. So he chased in the direction that the man might have escaped to. When he met me here, he estimated that there was no hope of catching up with him, so he went back. Speaking of which, although the man is hateful, he does have some ability to enter and exit the all-heavens boundary at will. Is he the person you are looking for? The three of them looked at each other speechlessly. Bai Changchun broke into the underworld royal palace alone to challenge the emperor of the underworld. No matter what, he should be a famous figure in the three realms. But they didn't expect him to be so bored. Why did he keep thinking about digging other people's tombs? Could it be that there was some treasure in the tomb? The one who was the most speechless was Yu Qianzhou. He was a little embarrassed to admit that this was the master he was so proud of. Granny Yen looked at the expressions of the three of them and said indifferently, It seems that it is. That person should be the person you are looking for. I don't care why you are looking for him. If you really want to find him, you can try your luck with Old Meng. I guess the person you are looking for won't give up on Old Meng so easily. Alright. I've told you what I know. I haven't talked so much for a long time. I'm not used to it. Xiaofu, I won't keep you. Don't bring irrelevant people here in the future. She was asking them to leave. It seemed that she really didn't like these two strangers. Chapter 1060. Since he had spoken so straightforwardly, the three of them naturally didn't want to stay and ask any more questions. With Gio as the leader, they left one after another. The three of them walked out of the small courtyard obediently. Xianxia took out his flying instrument again. After the three of them boarded it, it was still Xuanhuan who drove it. Before leaving, the three of them once again bowed to Grandma Yin, who was standing in the courtyard. Just as the flying shuttle slowly flew away, Xianxia looked back again. His gaze inadvertently swept across the grave on the left side of the mountain, and he seemed to see a familiar name on the tombstone. That name flashed across his mind like a flash of lightning, but it was quickly captured by him. Immediately he cried out in alarm, "Wait a minute! Old song, stop!" The flying shuttle that was about to accelerate suddenly stopped in the air. Xuanhuan looked back and said in a deep voice, "What do you want again? Don't be crazy again. Don't you know where you are?" Grandma Yin, who was about to turn back to her house in the courtyard, also turned around when she heard the voice. Her eyes flickered as she stared at the few people on the flying shuttle. Jiu awkwardly bowed to Xianxia and apologized. Then he gently pulled Xianxia and said in a low voice, "If you have anything to say, wait until we leave this place. Don't make too much noise here. If you disturb the resting dead, Grandma Yin will not be happy." Xianxia raised his hand and waved away his hand that was pulling him. His puzzled gaze kept sweeping back and forth between the two piles of graves that looked like the eyes of a monster. On the tombstone on the left was written, "Father, Taishu Zheng's tomb. Woman, Taishu Xian's tomb." On the right was written, "Husband, Moon God's tomb. Wife, Yan's tomb. Taishu Zheng, Taishu Xian. Aren't all the gods buried here? Why is Taishu Zheng's tomb here?" Xianxia's eyes narrowed slightly, frowned and pondered for a while, shook his head and muttered to himself, "Maybe it's a coincidence that we have the same name." Then he came to his senses, waved his hand at Xuanhuan and said, "It's all right, I didn't leave, right?" Since the two of them were standing so close to each other, Xuanhuan naturally heard what he said. He looked at Taishu Zheng's tombstone with some doubt and was prepared to ask about it later. Just as he was about to drive the flying shuttle, he heard Grandma Yan's voice coming from below, "Wait!" The three of them were shocked, thinking that Xianxia's loud voice had angered her. Xinyu immediately smiled bitterly and cupped his hands at her. "Grandma Yin, please calm down. It's his first time here and he doesn't know the rules here. Granny Yin, please be magnanimous and let him off." There was no other way. If something were to happen to Xianxia, he would also be in trouble. Thus he could only try his best to help. "I'm not as heartless as you think." Grandma Yan's eyes became bright and lively. She raised her hand and pointed at Xianxia and said, "You actually know about Taishu Zheng and Taishu Xian. This old lady is a little surprised. Why don't you come down and have a good chat with this old lady? I told you not to talk nonsense but you didn't listen. Look at you now." Xuanhuan secretly sent a voice transmission angrily. Xianxia looked at Xinyu speechlessly as if he was asking if it would be okay. While Xinyu was also trying to figure out Grandma Yan's intention, Grandma Yan had already teleported to the tomb on the left. She waved at Xianxia, who was in the air, and said, "Don't worry. If I still have a fiery temper, I wouldn't be guarding the tomb here. Come down and have a chat with this old lady. I have something to ask you." Xianxia paused, then cupped his hands and said with a hearty smile, "I'll do as you say." In a flash, he appeared in front of the tomb on the left. He looked abnormally short in front of the 7 to 8 meters tall tombstone. The dark red words on the tombstone were like a bloody mouth that wanted to devour him. It made him feel a little uncomfortable. "I wonder what Grandma Yin wants to ask this junior?" Xianxia asked respectfully. Grandma Yin walked to the tombstone and raised her hand to touch the 3 relatively small words Taishu Xian. After a while, her palm landed on the word Xian. She tilted her head and looked at Xianxia with a smile. "If I remember correctly, you used to call yourself Xianxia, right?" Grandma has a good memory. I just said my name casually once and Grandma remembered it. Xianxia cupped his hands in amazement and said, "That's right. I am indeed Xianxia." The two people on the flying shuttle showed a disgusted look at the same time. "What a glib-tongued junior. I'm not so old that I can forget what I just heard." Grandma Yin retracted her hand from the tombstone. She looked at Xianxia carefully for a while and said, "You're only at the early stage of minor immortal. I wonder how many years you've been cultivating for you to achieve what you have today." Xianxia was slightly shocked to see that the other party was able to see through his cultivation with a single glance. He replied honestly, "Time flies in the blink of an eye. Unknowingly, it has already been over 40 years since I stepped onto the path of cultivation. I've been mediocre for so many years. Initially, he wanted to lie for hundreds or even thousands of years, but he couldn't figure out how good the other party's eyesight was, so he could only answer honestly. You've reached the early stage of minor immortal in just 40 years? Grandma Yen looked at him again in surprise and said, "How can you be so fast? I can see that your aptitude isn't top-notch. Could it be that you've taken some panacea?" Xinyu and Songyun Xian were equally surprised. To be able to step into the minor immortal cultivation from immortal in just a few decades was indeed incredible. "Grandma, please understand." Yu Qianqiu quickly followed her words and said with a silly smile, "I've relied on panacea to forcefully increase my cultivation. I've taken the Great Restriction Breaking Pill, the Marrow Cleansing Pill, and the Immortal Ascension Pill. That's why I've barely reached the early stage of minor immortal cultivation." Grandma Yen revealed a look of understanding. Then she said with some regret, "Although it's fast to increase your cultivation this way, it's spoiling your body's foundation. Your future achievements will be limited. Unless you have the opportunity to go to the divine realm in the future to obtain some opportunities, otherwise, forget it. It's easier said than done to ascend from the immortal world to the divine realm." She straightened her expression and returned to the topic at hand. She frowned and said, "You've only stepped into the path of cultivation for a few decades. How could you have heard of Tai Shu Zheng and Tai Shu Xian? As far as I know, although Tai Shu Zheng was famous in the past, after he died in the hands of the devil god, under the suppression of the diabolism, very few people in the lower three realms know about Tai Shu Zheng. Even if you've heard of Tai Shu Zheng from someone else, his daughter, Tai Shu Xian, was not born in the lower three realms. How could someone from the lower three realms know about Tai Shu Xian?" Lower three realms? Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment. Then he understood. The so-called three realms in the past referred to the devil realm, the immortal realm, and the netherworld. But after the devil realm was sealed, everyone used to call it the lower three realms. So, the human realm replaced the devil realm and became the so-called three realms. In short, whether it was the three realms in the past or the current three realms, in the eyes of the people from the divine realm, they were all called the lower three realms because their divine realm was superior. Tai Shu Xian? I've never heard of it. I just couldn't help but feel puzzled when I saw the name on the tombstone. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He pointed to the grave made of dark red crystals and said, "So, the person buried in this grave is really the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shu Zheng, who was equally famous as the devil god." The ancestor of all demons who was equally famous as the devil god. Songyun, Xian and Xinyu looked at each other in shock. They had naturally heard of the peerless devil god who dominated the three realms in the past, but they had never heard of the ancestor of all demons who was equally famous as the devil god. To be able to be equally famous as the devil god, how powerful must that person be? But why had they never heard of it before? Chapter 1061. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, did not think this way. He was more confident in bargaining because he had guessed Tai Shu Xian's whereabouts correctly. He cupped his fists respectfully and said, "Junior has always yearned for those legendary seniors. Therefore, every time I hear about their deeds, if I don't ask them about it, I will feel as if I'm sitting on pins and needles. Because of this, I heard some things about the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shu Zheng, and was able to talk to Grandma face to face. If Granny is willing to tell me the details, I will immediately use all the forces in the three realms to track down the whereabouts of Tai Shu Xian. You are just a lowly pawn in the early stage of small immortal. How dare you ask me to use all the forces in the three realms to help me find that person? How many people can you use with your lowly cultivation?" Granny Yen said as she approached him step by step. She said in a deep voice with a frosty face, "How dare you play the game of bargaining in front of me? It seems that I have to teach you a lesson." Yu Qianqiu had always been one to achieve his goals. Every time something big happened, he would remain calm. He squinted his eyes and did not show any fear. Instead, he calmed down. Without moving, he cupped his hands and replied calmly, "Granny, you are wrong. Although my cultivation is not high, I am afraid that few people in the lower realm can compare to me in terms of connections." Seeing that the other party was still approaching, he raised his bargaining chip again and said, "Let's not talk about anything else. I have the decree of the immortal emperor in the immortal world, so I can travel freely in the immortal world. I also have the token of the emperor of the underworld given by the emperor of the underworld, so I can do whatever I want in the underworld. Except for the devil realm, which is sealed and I can't enter, I think it is not difficult to find someone in the lower realm. As long as she is still in the lower realm, I have a way to find her." Then he pointed at Xianyu and continued to raise his bargaining chip. He said confidently, "In order to find the person who broke into this place, I can even find Xianyu and enter the barrier of heavens to search. Do you still not believe in my ability to find someone even with these proofs?" As a result, Granny Yen was still unmoved. It seemed that she did not believe his answer at all. In this critical situation, Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted, "Granny Yen! Even a person with a wide network like me has never heard of Taishu Xian in the lower realm. Aren't you worried that something has happened to her? Don't you want me to help you find out about her? Even if she is dead or alive?" These words were like a spell that immediately froze Grandma Yen a few steps away from Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Songyun, Xian and Xinyu, who were extremely nervous, slowly let out a sigh of relief. Although they were fine for the time being, the two of them were still very worried. Their eyes stared down without moving. Although the cultivation of the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld are nothing in the god realm, they are still the overlords of a realm in the lower realm. How can they be friends with a minor immortal like you? Granny Yen looked at Xinyu and said, "Xiao Yu, tell me honestly, is what he said true or false?" Although the cultivation of the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld are nothing in the god realm, they are still the overlords of a realm in the lower realm. How can they be friends with a minor immortal like you? Granny Yen looked at Xinyu and said, "Xiao Yu, tell me honestly, is what he said true or false? If you dare to help him deceive me, don't blame me for being rude. Even if he is deceiving you, my life is in his hands. Killing him is no different than killing me. I can't not help him." Xinyu smiled bitterly in his heart and replied, "Granny, you're worrying too much. In the outside world, his strength in the lower three realms is indeed extraordinary. Don't be fooled by his low cultivation level. He's the sect master of the World Chamber of Commerce in the immortal world. This time, the immortal emperor of the immortal realm even sent the chief consecrator of the number one sect, Heartless Palace, to protect him." Then, she pointed at Qing Yunxin and continued, "Just before we entered the barrier of heavens, I saw him talking to the emperor of the underworld in the endless horizon with my own eyes. What he said is true." Xinyu could be said to have helped with all his might this time, but he had no other choice in order to save his life. Granny Yin slowly turned her head and looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "In that case, can you guarantee that you will help me find little girl Xian?" This. Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, "I never boast shamelessly. If I can do it, I can do it. If I can't, I won't boast. If Granny says that she will, I can't guarantee that I will definitely help you find her. Since she has not been famous for so many years, I am worried that she might have met with an accident. But as long as she left some clues outside, I'll be able to find out about her." Qing Yun Xian, who was on the flying shuttle, really wanted to despise him. Wasn't he boasting shamelessly? The outside world was so big and so many years had passed. Even if the emperor of the underworld and the immortal emperor joined forces, they might not be able to find out anything about Taishu Xian from some clues. "You're amazing. You're more amazing than Jin Tai and Bai Qi combined." Although he thought about it, he naturally wouldn't expose it. After all, it also involved his fate. However, he still quite admired that guy. As long as he was determined, he dared to lie to anyone. He was really audacious. Jiao Yu, who was helping the villain, looked at Yu Qianqiu speechlessly. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu didn't promise to do everything. Instead, it made Granny Yen believe in his ability. This was Yu Qianqiu's method of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. In short, regardless of whether Granny Yen really believed him or not, the expression on her face finally eased. She asked lightly, "How are you going to help me find information about Xianyu?" Yu Qianqiu made up his mind. He cupped his hands and said, "Of course I have to ask Senior to tell me about her appearance and characteristics. Otherwise, I don't even know what she looks like. How can I send people to find her? And the approximate time she left here. Of course, the more detailed, the better." Granny Yen thought about it seriously. After a while, she slowly said, "I really don't remember the specific time since I passed my days here. It should be about 200,000 years. She is very beautiful. If someone saw her at that time, they would definitely remember her, so it shouldn't be difficult to find out. But I'm really afraid that her appearance will bring trouble to herself. Although she was born in the god realm, due to a strange fate she was born with the underworld body. In other words, she is a meditation cultivator. Apart from these 2 points, she also has a rare ability in the world. She was born with the art of divination. These are the characteristics." After Granny Yen finished speaking, she suddenly realized that Yu Qianqiu was stunned and seemed to be distracted. She immediately snorted angrily and said, "Did you hear what I said? Know the art of divination." Xianxia muttered to himself blankly. He recalled the underworld saintess he met in the East Holy Land Palace. It seemed like she knew the art of divination. At that time he felt that it was a little strange, so he had a deep impression of her. He shook his head slightly in disbelief and said, "Could it be her?" Chapter 1062. As soon as he said this, although his voice was soft, it immediately attracted the attention of the three people. They all looked at him in disbelief. Grey Cloud Xan stared blankly for a moment, then his lips curled into a disdainful smile. Based on his understanding of Xianxia, he didn't think there was such a coincidence. Xianxia knew him as soon as he said he knew him. He guessed that Xianxia was trying to swindle him again. There was really nothing he didn't dare to do. Granny Yin regained her calmness after her surprise. She also didn't believe that there was such a coincidence. She dragged out a non-committal, "Oh," and said, "It seems that there is no lack of coincidences in this world. Could it be that you've seen little Xian?" Xianxia thought about the scene when he bumped into the underworld saintess. He waved his hand and asked thoughtfully, "I'm not sure. Granny Yin, does the Taishu Xian you mentioned like to wear black clothes, have long hair that goes down her shoulders, and cover half of her face with a black veil?" Listening to him speak so clearly, Sang Yunxin and Shen Yu looked at each other as if asking each other if they believed what he said. Granny Yan's eyes lit up and she said excitedly, "That's right. Little girl Xian had always had long hair that was unrestrained, and she liked to wear black clothes. As for the black veil that covers half of her face, it must be to hide her appearance. Does the person you mentioned know divination?" Xianxia shook his head and smiled bitterly. "It's because you said Taishu Xian knows divination. When I first met that person, she used a pentagonal black sand table to perform divination for me." "Black sand table?" Granny Yin interrupted him in surprise. She took a step forward and grabbed Xianxia's wrist. She said excitedly, "That's right, it can't be wrong. Little Xian is used to using black sand to perform divination. You must have seen her. Tell me what happened to her." Sang Yunxin and Shen Yu looked at each other again. "Really? She can't be so accurate, right?" Xianxia grimaced and waved his hand. With a twisted expression he said, "Granny Yin, I know that you have a high cultivation level. Let's talk nicely. There's no need to get physical." Grandma Yin immediately reacted. She was too excited and used too much strength to pinch him. She let go of her hand in embarrassment and apologized. "I lost my composure. So, I am greatly indebted to her mother. Before she passed away, she entrusted her to me to take care of her. For so many years there has been no news of her. Now that I suddenly received news of her, I can't help but lose control of my emotions. I hope that you can understand this old woman." "I'm sorry." "Understood. Understanding. If that's the case, then there's no mistake. We're talking about the same person." Xianxia waved his hand heartily and said with a hearty laugh, "I've never known her name, but it turns out that her name is Taishu Xian. It seems that some things are predestined by the heavens. She and I are good friends and she has a close relationship with you, Granny. Now that I have met you, Granny, if this isn't fate, then what is it?" "You're good friends with her?" Grandma Yin looked at Xianxia with an infinitely gentle expression. She reached out to hold his hand and patted it gently, like a grandmother looking at her grandson. She nodded repeatedly and said, "That's right. It's indeed fate. Tell me quickly, how is she now?" Sangyun Xan and Shen Yu were dumbfounded as they watched the two of them turn from a hostile couple into a close family. They didn't expect the world to be so unpredictable. It was really a coincidence that the Taishu Xian that Grandma Yen was looking for turned out to be a good friend of Xianxia. Even in their dreams, they didn't expect that Xianxia would pull their relationship all the way to the netherworld forbidden area. Xianxia didn't care so much. He was worried that the myriad demon heart sutra that Bai Suzhen was cultivating might have some hidden dangers. He wanted to deceive her and figure out the situation first. As for the future, he could think about it later. Anyway, he didn't do anything against reason, so there was no need for him to feel guilty. Thus, he patted Grandma Yan's hand intimately and said with a smile, "Granny, you can rest assured. Taishu Xian is living very well now. I'm afraid that no one in the netherworld or immortal world dares to touch her." "What do you mean?" Grandma Yin held his hand with both her hands, like a grandparent and grandchild who hadn't seen each other for a long time talking about their family. This happy scene was enviable to the onlookers. Xianxia looked back at the two people on the flying shuttle with a smile and said, Actually, speaking of this Taishu Xian, although you haven't seen her before, the two of you must have heard of her great name. Her current status in the netherworld can be said to be second only to the emperor. Can you guess who she is now? Songyun Xian and Xin Yu were confused at first. Then they looked at each other and cried out in unison, Madame Heiqi? Grandma Yin frowned and said, Madame Heiqi? Could it be that little Xian has found a man she likes? Yu Qianzhou's face twitched. He looked at the two disdainfully and said, Is that all you know? Madame Heiqi is nothing. She is only the concubine of the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi. Haven't you heard of the Underworld Saintess? Underworld Saintess? Songyun Xian and Xin Yu cried out in surprise again. The two of them had naturally heard of the Underworld Saintess. However, this person was even more reclusive than the Emperor of the Underworld. She almost lived in seclusion in the Underworld Royal Palace. She was very mysterious. As time went by, unless someone mentioned her, very few people would remember her existence. Compared to Madame Heiqi, who had millions of soldiers and horses under her control, although the Underworld Saintess had a higher status in the Underworld Royal Palace, Madame Heiqi seemed to be second only to the Emperor of the Underworld. At this moment, Songyun Xian really wanted to ask Yu Qianzhou, Are you kidding me? You are a close friend of the Underworld Saintess? However, revealing Madame Heiqi's secret was no different from digging a hole for himself. When he thought of the conversation between the Emperor of the Underworld and Yu Qianzhou, who actually let everyone go, he couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. That's right. Yu Qianzhou turned around and looked at Grandma Yen with a smile. I am now sure that Taishu Xian is the Underworld Saintess conferred by the Underworld Emperor as the Underworld Saintess. She is very safe now. Grandma, you don't have to worry about her safety. That's good. Grandma Yen heaved a sigh of relief. Yu Qianzhou was a little puzzled and asked, Since Taishu Xian can enter and exit the boundary of heavens, why didn't she come back to see you after more than 200,000 years? Could it be that Grandma had some conflict with her? You've got the wrong idea. I brought her up by myself. I treat her as my own granddaughter. The two of us are lonely and depend on each other. How could there be any conflict? Grandma Yen let out a long sigh and recalled with a confused look in her eyes, Speaking of which, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have told her about her background. That year, she suddenly speculated that there would always be a loophole in the boundary of heavens, and the insurmountable boundary of heavens would open a path for a short period of time. The little girl was thinking about avenging her parents and decided to take advantage of this opportunity to escape from the boundary of heavens. She wanted to find a chance to avenge her parents outside. I couldn't persuade her, so I could only let her be. Avenge her parents? Yu Qianzhou looked at the towering tombstone beside him with a puzzled look and sighed. I didn't expect Taishu Zheng, the ancestor of all demons, to have a daughter. In that case, Taishu Xian wants to seek revenge on the demon god. Her ambition is commendable. I hope she can kill the demon god as soon as possible. Because of this, he thought of Yan Zhuixing. Although he had gone to the sealed demonic world, he couldn't let go of the fact that he had the background of the demon god. He was afraid that the bastard would make a comeback at any time. If the Saintess of the Underworld had a way to eliminate the demon god, the pressure on him would be greatly reduced. No matter how powerful Yan Zhuixing was, he had the courage to fight him. However, the demon god's reputation was too great. Although he had gone to the divine world long ago, his heart-palpitating legend still lingered in the three realms. His influence had lingered for a long time. It was very frightening. Seeking revenge on the demon god? It's easier said than done. Grandma Yan's pupils shrank. She seemed to have thought of something and her eyes were filled with horror. She shook her head with great difficulty and said, You haven't seen the power of the demon god. It's hard to imagine how terrifying he is. He's so powerful that it makes one's hair stand on end. It's not an exaggeration to say that he's a peerless genius. Perhaps he's even called the peerless genius. The demon god is the #1 expert in the divine world. It's almost impossible for little Xian to avenge her parents. What? Yu Qianzhou turned pale with fright when he heard that. Mo Shen is the #1 expert of the deity world. Is he that powerful? He was cursing in his heart. Yan Zhuixing had actually found such a cunning backer. I don't want to admit how powerful the demon god is, but he's indeed so powerful. I'm someone who has personally experienced it. Grandma Yen raised her hand and pointed to another grave. She smiled bitterly and said, My man died in his hands and I almost lost my life in his hands. Then he waved his hand and pointed at the boundless land in the distance, sighing, There are close to 10 million experts from the divine world buried in this vast cemetery. In fact, the number of people who were qualified to rest here in the beginning was only a few hundred. However, ever since the demon god came to the divine world, there have been close to 10 million more dead people here. 10 million experts from the divine world died by his hands alone. No one could stop him in the divine world. So, tell me, is he not amazing? Killed more than 10 million experts in the divine world? Xianxia was shocked and his scalp tingled. He knew that the demon god was powerful, but he didn't expect him to be so arrogant in the divine world. There was actually such a fierce person in the world. But then he felt that something was wrong. He scratched his head with a trace of doubt and said, "Are there so many gods in the divine world? Just the number of people who died is almost 10 million. Then the gods in the divine world are too worthless. This is just a misunderstanding. The divine world has been multiplying for countless years and there are already trillions of living creatures. Because of the incomparable cultivation resources in the lower realm, there are also many experts of the divine level. But it's not so easy to obtain the position of God and be conferred as a real god. The cultivation in the divine world is divided into little god, great god and ancient god. If you want to be conferred as a god, your cultivation must at least reach the level of great god. And you have to go through fierce competition and get the recognition of several ancient gods before you can be conferred as a god. You're tuning in to the Sworddance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.